There were a lot of movies I liked in 2015, so I thought I'd do a top 30 to give a better view of what mattered to me this past year. Number 30, Ant-Man. Despite all its flaws, Ant-Man won me over with its enthusiasm and sense of fun. Its ties to the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe do feel like a drag on it, and many movies this year had a similar problem. It's too close to a retread of Iron Man. There are enough shades of the Edgar Wright movie that could have been still in here that I like it, but it also has a ridiculous opening segment structured around product placement and an unnecessary scene involving the Falcon, so I can't say it was that great either. Number 29, Hitchcock Truffaut. I barely care about this documentary as a movie in and of itself, but it's important to me because it exposed me to the amazing interview and book that it's about. Truffaut's comprehensive interview series with Hitchcock is both fascinating as a critical discussion and for how it changed the trajectory of critical opinion about Hitchcock in America. Hitchcock Truffaut served as my entry point to a rabbit hole that I really enjoyed diving down, even if the movie itself isn't bringing that much to the table on its own. Number 28, Best of Enemies. Another documentary that basically just gets by because its source material is so strong, specifically because the movie is about the televised debate between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley in 1968. There's a wealth of film content for the movie to lean on. The movie works specifically because that material is so strong, and because of the long-term import of those debates beyond the political landscape that they took place in. This is a story of how modern political media was forever and accidentally changed and shaped by these two men, and how the entire idea of debate was ruined in the United States for the sake of entertainment. Number 27, Black Sea. Two great tastes that go great together. Black Sea is a submarine heist movie, and that combo just works. Jude Law as the grizzled ship's captain is the real draw here, and he carries the movie. The third act is a little weak and bloated, but this is just a very solid genre picture. Boats are like whores. The old ones know how to look after you the best. Number 26, Project Almanac. Time-traveling teens. Project Almanac owes its existence to Chronicle, and is kind of the corporate sellout version, but it just stuck with me all year. There's just something so appealing to me about teenagers using time travel for the dumbest reasons, and making such obviously bad decisions. Number 25, Run All Night. I'm a pretty big fan of Liam Neeson's run of non-Taken action movies, and while this one is barely an action movie at all, more of a drama, it still totally worked for me. The Taken movies themselves don't quite work because they just assume that Liam Neeson is just the greatest, whereas in the other ones he's still a complete badass, but he's also clearly a garbage human being. The story of Run All Night isn't too far off from John Wick, except played straight and not hilarious, which is not an improvement, but the scenes of Liam Neeson and Ed Harris talking to each other are legitimately great and the reason to see the movie. Number 24, Jupiter Ascending. I'm a pretty big fan of the Wachowskis' work, particularly Speed Racer. That movie is just great, but I also have no idea how they keep getting such large budgets to make these giant flops. Jupiter Ascending is an overstuffed mess, but it's also one that's clearly from the vision of the weirdos who made it. We so rarely get that kind of earnest weirdness in our blockbusters, and I really appreciate it here. I really like this dumb movie. Bees Don't Lie. Number 23, The End of the Tour. I can imagine a world where I saw The End of the Tour and found it insufferable, but when I saw it, it worked for me. As much as this movie is about a particular conversation, the reason it works for me is because it's also about conversation more generally. I don't know, this one hit me in a way that's hard for me to verbalize, and I'm not sure how much of that even has to do with the movie itself. Specifically, the reason this movie isn't higher is because the fact that David Foster Wallace went on to kill himself years after this conversation warps the entire movie, and that part of the proceedings kind of bothers me and isn't part of why I like it. Number 22, The Salvation. The Salvation is just a solid western. It doesn't do anything to really stand out, but it's just good. I guess what's different about this movie is how quickly our hero gets his revenge. After that, it's actually the repercussions from that and the villain's revenge against our hero that drives the plot. Some things about how it wraps up don't make sense, but whatever, I just like this kind of movie. Number 21, White God. Okay, there's a big portion of White God that I don't really think is any good, and there's a parable here that I also don't think quite works. But the turning point in this movie is one of the greatest things I saw in a movie all year. Holy shit, do I love the climax of this movie. It takes too long to get there for this movie to be any higher on the list, but man is it good. Number 20, What We Do in the Shadows. What We Do in the Shadows is just a really funny movie. It comes from the people who worked on the Flight of the Conchords TV series and has a very similar sense of humor. If the movie had had any songs like Flight of the Conchords, it definitely would have been higher, and I do kind of find it forgettable, but damn, I laughed a lot when I saw it, and there are a lot of good jokes here. Number 19, Dope. I kinda had Dope overhyped for me, and it just didn't quite hit. I've had a hard time wrestling with my feelings on it, but it's a good movie. There are problems I've had with it in terms of how heavy-handed it is with its point, and how much coincidence the plot relies on, but that's all forgivable because the movie is funny. There's some ridiculous stuff in this movie, and that shit does hit. Number 18, Kingsman. Despite the obvious James Bond allusions, Kingsman is really just Men in Black again, but it does that successfully, and I've seen enough sequels to know that that magic is hard to recapture. The church scene is a fucking amazing action scene, but none of the other action scenes in the movie stand up next to it. It also does a little too much finger pointing at movie cliches while still being full of movie cliches. That one action scene though, holy shit. Number 17, Inside Out. Inside Out relies on creating an emotional connection with the audience, and succeeds at it. It also just has a great visual energy that made me excited to see it, something I haven't gotten from the visuals of a Pixar movie in years. I think the movie's a little confused on the emotions relationship with Riley, whether they are her or just parental towards her, and it doesn't hit me as hard as my favorite Pixar movies. Good stuff though. Number 16, Cop Car. Cop Car reminded me a lot of White God, and while its climax isn't as amazing, it's a much more sure-footed movie all around. I was pretty sure I was gonna have a good time when the movie opened up with a scene of kids practicing cursing, and I was not wrong. A movie that nails both child wonder and brutal violence. A good movie that could have been great if its ending had been tighter. Number 15, Peace Officer. I can get really frustrated with movies that take really good material and either squander that or just don't do enough with it. For me, the onus is on the movie to prove it's worthy of covering that material. Peace Officer delivers on this because while the cold irony of its premise is what got me into the theater, it's Dub Lawrence and his skills as both an investigator and speaker that made this movie sing. Number 14, It Follows. So many horror movies have been built around the idea of a faceless killer, but so many of them fall into the trap of eventually giving the monster a face, whether that face is an actual face or just a mask. Once you do that, you've given up on your idea for why this was scary, and you're no longer tapping into that fear. It Follows gets a lot of bonus points from me for following through on that. The movie does break its own rules a couple times, and the climax isn't great, but the final shot is real good, and I really like the tone and pace overall. This is quality horror. Number 13, Creed. At its core, Creed is just Rocky again, but it's also kind of the best Rocky, at least in terms of filmmaking. The lack of a good Apollo Creed analog really hurts Creed in the comparison. This is the best boxing on screen in the series. I buy into all the characters and their roles here immediately. This is one of those ideas that was just too good to not exist. Number 12, The Martian. If The Martian were a serious drama, its litany of flaws would have put it lower on the list. Good thing it's basically a comedy in terms of how fun and consistently funny it is. The situations are serious, but it's also ridiculous that primarily you're here to laugh. Matt Damon carries the movie, as much of it relies on him on his own, and he's fantastic. The scenes back on NASA are so dumb and keep the movie out of the top 10 for me, but they're acceptable in a movie you're not really supposed to take too seriously. This is a fun adventure movie, the kind we barely get. It's so refreshing to get a space movie that's just fun. Number 11, Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation. Rogue Nation is just a great blockbuster. The stakes are high, the set pieces are great, and the villain is compelling. In a lot of ways, Rogue Nation is just a weaker version of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. It certainly isn't as impressive visually, but it has a much better villain, which makes up for a lot of that. Also, Rebecca Ferguson is a revelation here. The scene where she daintily steps onto a dude and then snaps his neck gracefully is amazing, and when she lifts up her skirt to aim her sniper rifle, yeah. She also gets to have a really rad knife fight. Number 10, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This movie is not flawless by any means, and my issues with it almost kept it out of the top 10, but the biggest testament to the strength of The Force Awakens is how it captures the imagination. There's some visual storytelling here that the movies before here on the list just don't compete with. Finn, Rey, and Kylo Ren are great characters, and I'm just so invested in their adventures here and moving forward. The slavish way it follows from A New Hope is for sure damaging to the movie in a significant way, but the youthful earnestness it brings to the table allows me to forgive it to an extent. On top of that, it captures the aesthetic of Star Wars that I love. If Episode 8 doesn't move forward and away from the structure of the previous movies, the problems here will sting more, but for at least 2 years, I'm bought in. Number 9, A Hard Day. A Hard Day is like the movie equivalent of a game of Jenga. It's just one ridiculous thing after another, all building on top of each other and pushing its lead characters to the brink. It's funny and tense, just a great ride. Number 8, Shyrack. Shyrack is unique among movies I've seen. It's both very real and emotional about serious issues, while also being completely ridiculous. There's an amazing, very angry speech about how fucked up the United States is, and there's a climactic sex-off the entire world watches on TV. This is a great use of art, turning topics that are hard and unpleasant to talk about and turning them into something new and compelling. Number 7, Office. The execution in Office is just so goddamn impressive. This is the only movie I've seen that effectively cuts the difference between what works as a stage musical and the visual character required of a good movie. There's a real sense of the physical space here, but the creative design of the set allows the camera the freedom necessary for this to work as a movie. On top of that, I really like the songs. The singing is great, the acting is great, man, I just love this thing. Number 6, Phoenix. The final scene of Phoenix is so great and perfect. In every way, this movie ends correctly. Up to that point, the movie is good, but man, it's that last scene that makes it great. Number 5, Anomalisa. Anomalisa is built around a gimmick, but it's a good gimmick, allowing the audience to understand the main character's mental breakdown by experiencing his reality with him. Also, the climax of the movie is a sex scene that might be the best sex scene ever in a movie. Authentically awkward and intimate despite being done with puppets. Number 4, Yakuza Apocalypse. Dumb in all the right ways, Yakuza Apocalypse goes all the way with its ridiculous ideas, and that's why I love it. When it plays things serious and straight, it has a real weight and gravitas that only a great director can capture, and that makes such a stark contrast with the the over-the-top ridiculousness the movie delivers on. This is the kind of spectacle I want. Number 3, Mad Max Fury Road. The most technically impressive movie of the year easily. Fury Road just looks and sounds amazing. This is basically a reboot that still feels like it's pushing its series forward. So many Hollywood movies this year felt like retreads, even good ones, but Mad Max feels entirely new despite being the 4th movie in a series, both in terms of filmmaking and storytelling. This movie was exciting in a way that no other blockbuster was. There are plenty of nitpicks you could make, but I don't give a shit. The rest of this movie is so goddamn strong. Number 2, The Hateful Eight. Surprise, surprise, The Hateful Eight is about hate, but it's also very much about the specific hate that lived in a post-Civil War United States. The remarkable thing is that it's both about the destructive power of hate, how it puts people against each other, but also the power of hate to get people to overlook their differences and come together to hate someone else. Tarantino's filmmaking sensibilities really mesh with my own tastes. The movie looks amazing and the dialogue is really good. It's just a great chamber piece. Number 1, Bone Tomahawk. As much as I like the writing in The Hateful Eight, I think this is the best script of the year. As much as I appreciate Tarantino's takedown of the classic Western hero, I still prefer stories about heroes. Sometimes I don't want a movie to make a point. Sometimes I just want the characters and plot to stand on their own. Sometimes I want an underdog hero overcoming the odds, and sometimes I just want cannibalistic troglodytes. Bone Tomahawk is a great Western, a great horror movie, really funny when it wants to be, and the overall best movie of 2015. Thank you for your time.